Discovered how a single father's incredible actions transformed a CEO's life in 30 touching days. Each day felt heavier than the last for Rebecca, skills sharpened in boardrooms, yet unprepared for the psychological storm brewing in her heart. She juggled all the responsibilities of a high-powered CEO, yet in each achievement, the loneliness seared deeper. In the midst of her ambition, she couldn't shake the feeling that each promotion came with a loss. The distance from her estranged father gnawed at her insides, a wound that hadn't healed in years. When she first set foot in Thomas's garage, it had been a simple car repair. Little did she realize, it would reshape her perception of success. As a single father, Thomas carried his own burdens, sweaty palms and tired eyes telling a story of resilience. His greasy hands worked tirelessly on engines while his heart was torn between being there for his teenage daughter, Lily, and making ends meet in their humble Midwestern home. He was no corporate giant, yet his story echoed the soul of hard-working Americans who truly know the meaning of sacrifice. Now, as he lifted the hood of another luxury car, he had no inkling that destiny was bringing Rebecca right into his world. The first few days of Rebecca's visits were filled with superficial conversation. "How long will this take?" she'd ask impatiently, glancing at her watch as if time was a luxury she couldn't afford. But with each passing weekend, as she tried to remember the difference between a spark plug and an oil filter, her polished facade began to crack. Thomas, with his unfiltered honesty and perspective on life, started chipping away at her misplaced priorities, revealing beneath her corporate armor a woman desperately seeking connection. One Saturday, as they adjusted gears, Rebecca halted mid-sentence. "What if I'm missing out?" she blurted, her voice trembling with fear. "What if chasing success costs me everything: my father, my relationships, my happiness?" The weight of those words hung heavy between them. She had never allowed herself to entertain such questions, but Thomas was disarming in his confidence, his blue-collar virtues shining a light on her hidden insecurities. That moment felt like a thunderclap in her otherwise choreographed life, stirring up feelings she had buried under layers of ambition. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Every week the conversations grew deeper. Each story Thomas told about working nights to afford Lily's tuition echoed in Rebecca's mind, vividly contrasting the sterile boardroom chats about future profits. Conversations about joy found in small victories began to turn the wheels in her heart. Yet, an important promotion loomed before her, a siren call of power whispering promises of glory. And here she was, gatekeeper of her own dreams, yet simultaneously, shackled by the fear of missing out on family ties. Then came the morning she faced her father. The pent-up fears about reconciling the past clashed with her professional climb. Thomas saw her internal struggle, the tug-of-war of ambition versus familial connection. As Rebecca turned to leave, her phone buzzed, a call from corporate. In that moment, Thomas could see the storm brewing, a moment where the love for family wrestled with the hunger for success. The dirt of the garage, the tension of their budding friendship, and the fate of familial bonds stood at the precipice of a decision. Would she embrace the call of her heart or answer the corporate world's relentless demands? Rebecca stepped outside the garage, the cool air biting at her skin, awakening her senses. The cacophony of traffic and distant chatter felt almost foreign, a stark contrast to the comforting scent of motor oil and grease that lingered within. Her heart raced, not just from the weight of the corporate call she just received, but from the profound realization that she stood at a crossroads, a juncture that could redefine her existence. The allure of achieving her next promotion beckoned like a treacherous siren. Glowing accolades and recognition rattled in her mind, tinged with the anxiety of what she could be leaving behind. But, on the other side, there was Thomas, a man who had shown her a different measure of success, rooted in resilience, hard work, and above all, connection. As conflicting thoughts surged within, she fought against the surge of familiar instincts to hide behind ambition and status. Days turned into a blur. Every weekend spent with Thomas became an opportunity to peel back the tightly wound layers of her life. She'd share fleeting stories of her boardroom victories, yet beneath the bravado, she confessed a growing discontent. As the week's stress faded in the garage's humble embrace, a flicker of resolve ignited. She began to form a new identity, one that learned to balance aspiration with authenticity, a delicate act she never thought possible. The tension remained, bound tight with the impending promotion. Each day leading up felt like a countdown, a ticking clock before a bomb destined to explode. Yet, as Rebecca approached her office, the polished glass walls felt more like a confining cage than a symbol of her success. No matter how many meetings she charismatically led, an unquenchable thirst for real connection lingered like an unresolved riddle. In a moment of impulsiveness, she picked up her phone and dialed her father. Her heart pounded as she anxiously waited for him to answer. The familiar cadence of his voice brought forth a flood of emotions, mixed with regret and longing. After the greetings, the conversation danced around superficial pleasantries. But deep inside her, the farthest corners of her heart were crying for resolution, waiting to break free. Thomas's unwavering strength echoed in her mind. He never backed down from a challenge, even when the odds were stacked against him. His ability to pivot and adapt in tough times inspired her to examine her approach. She began questioning why she had allowed fear to dictate her choices, sacrificing genuine connections for titles and pinnacles of success. The weight of her father's absence struck her afresh, a poignant reminder that life was too fleeting to let resentment fester. Yet, amidst this reawakening, the saturation of corporate responsibilities pressed in ominously. The contentment she once felt in boardrooms now seemed hollow. Would seizing this promotion fulfill her dreams, or lead her deeper into the very loneliness she feared? A choice lay ahead, juxtaposing familial ties against career aspirations, a reflection of her true values. The following week, Rebecca found herself rehearsing for a presentation that could seal her fate. Images of Thomas and Lily lingered in her mind, infusing her with determination. What did she want her legacy to reflect? With each word she practiced, the answer crystallized. It was time to confront not only her superiors but also the truth within, the need for work-life balance, a plea for compassion amid ambition. As resolve strengthened, the final moment arrived. Shaking, Rebecca stood at the meeting room's threshold, facing a drag where cold corporate expressions awaited her. But in the depths of her gut, she felt the warmth of family that Thomas had illuminated in her heart. Resilience wasn't merely about accomplishing accolades, it was also about nurturing bonds that mattered. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, every heartbeat echoing against the sterile walls, ready for the fight ahead. But the path forward was riddled with uncertainties, tests of loyalty and conviction, blurring the lines between ambition and love. A knock interrupted her introspection. The door swung open, revealing Thomas. His presence was unexpected but weighty, carrying wisdom in his eyes. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly, concealing a deeper understanding. Rebecca glanced back towards the conference room and took a measured breath, feeling the gravity of her next decision. Ready or not, this was where her journey would truly commence, and this time, it wouldn't just be about success, it would be about reclaiming her soul. Would she harness the courage to bridge the gaps in her relationships? The answer loomed, as the moment of truth approached, a moment that would define her path forever. Rebecca stepped into the conference room, a charged energy enveloping her like a palpable force. The sterile air carried tension, and the sharp scent of coffee hung heavy, a reminder of the many battles fought within these walls. She quickly scanned the faces of her colleagues, each visage a mask of expectation and judgment. Her heart hammered, but in that moment, she felt an unexpected surge of resolve. The meeting began, each presentation flowing one into the other. Rebecca listened intently, yet her thoughts drifted more often than not. She envisioned Thomas, sitting at their kitchen table, a warm smile lighting his face as he recounted the day's events with Lily. It was in those moments of laughter and simple joy that Rebecca felt truly alive. The juxtaposition of that warmth against the cold corporate banter seemed stark, driving her pulse to a rapid beat. With her name finally called, the room hushed. She stood at the front, her hands steadying her laptop as she faced the audience of judgmental eyes. The usual fear gripped her momentarily, but an image of her father flickered his disappointment once vivid, now a ghost that lingered. She took a moment, inhaling deeply, summoning the determination that had begun to shape her narrative outside of these glass walls. "Thank you for the opportunity," Rebecca began, her voice stronger than she felt. "Today, I want to discuss something beyond the usual metrics of success." She could feel their surprise. The shift from expectation of numbers to a more personal reflection was almost tangible. "I've spent my career chasing promotions and accolades, believing that this was the key to fulfillment." Her mind flashed back to dinners filled with silence and strained smiles, her ambitions always there, a shadow that overshadowed genuine connection. "But in that chase, I lost sight of what truly matters, the relationships we build and the legacy we create." Rebecca caught herself looking towards Thomas, imagining his nod of understanding. She continued, "I am advocating for not only the pursuit of profits but a measure of compassion in our work. We need to integrate our personal lives with our missions, because our well-being operates at the crossroads of career and connection." She paused for effect, the air crackling with apprehension. Was the room with her or against her? "I believe we can reshape our company culture. By leading with empathy, we not only enrich our work environment but also enhance our overall productivity. People can't pour from empty cups." The conversation that ensued was heated, a mixture of challenges and reluctant acquiescence. As voices clashed, Rebecca felt a potent mix of trepidation and fiery conviction. She never imagined herself standing firm against the tide of traditional corporate rhetoric, but here she was defending a vision that intertwined her aspirations with her awakening values. The meeting ended with tepid applause, but Rebecca sensed a foundation shaken, a sliver of her vision solidified. As she walked out, adrenaline surged through her veins, electrifying every part of her. Had she truly planted the seed of change? In the coming days, a palpable shift echoed through the office. Casual conversations shifted towards authenticity, and small gestures of kindness began to surface. Thomas had indeed ignited something in her that was more potent than gold stars on a resume, an awakening to her own humanity and that of others. Yet, as the days passed, Rebecca found herself grappling with the fallout from her bold proposal. Faces that once seemed encouraging now carried a weight that hinted at resistance. Her superior, a stalwart traditionalist, had loosened no strings despite the hopeful currents she felt stirring. Then, she overheard whispers drowning her excitement, dissent brewing in corners of the office that hinted at retaliation against what they saw as unorthodox changes. The true test of her commitment to balancing ambition with authenticity had yet to emerge. Determined not to shrink back, Rebecca resolved to address these ripples head-on. The time had come to gather allies, to confront the fallout of her ambitions directly. She needed clarity and courage more than ever. As she prepared her notes for the upcoming meeting with her superior, doubts crept in, whispering temptations of retreat. Would she hold firm against the seams of tradition? And what would it mean for her vision if she didn't? The pressure mounted, drawing her into reflection. How far was she truly willing to go to reclaim her legacy? The horizon ahead blurred with uncertainty, but one thing burned clearly: Rebecca was just getting started. The stakes were rising, and she could feel the storm gathering. What awaited her on this winding path of ambition and compassion, and could she consolidate her power against those who sought to silence her? The answer trembled just beyond her reach, a revelation waiting to be unearthed. Days blurred together as Rebecca navigated through the aftermath of her bold proposal. The initial wave of enthusiasm quickly transformed into a mere echo of doubt. She stared at her reflection, her true self colliding with the business persona she had meticulously crafted over the years. The woman in the mirror didn't look as confident anymore. She looked uncertain, grappling with the consequences of her idealism. As she prepared for the meeting with her superior, Rebecca's hands trembled slightly. Each page she turned felt like a blueprint of her own breakdown rather than a plan for collaboration. The murmurs of dissent echoed in her mind, reminding her that transformation often met with resistance, especially in a corporate culture steeped in power dynamics. She couldn't help but wonder, was she fighting a losing battle? Whatever happens today, own your narrative, she whispered to herself, drawing on the resolve that had urged her onto this path. She visualized Thomas and Lily, understanding how her success rippled into their lives as well. If the office remained frozen in ancient traditions, how could she continue to share the warmth she felt at home? The stakes were undeniably personal. She finally entered her superior's office, the atmosphere thick with unspoken challenges. Mr. Whitman, a corporate stalwart, sat across the desk, his demeanor authoritative yet curious. His fingers tapped an almost rhythmic but unnerving beat against his desk. The silence hung heavily between them, a battlefield for the impending confrontation. "Rebecca," he began, his voice steady but laced with scrutiny. "Your presentation has been controversial. Some believe it compromises our strategic approach." Her heart raced. "I understand the concern, but isn't our company's success ultimately defined by how we connect with clients and amongst ourselves? Creativity flourishes in an environment of empathy. Isn't that worth cultivating?" Her voice was firmer now, realizing that the personal stakes compelled her to articulate her values clearly, louder than mere analytics had previously allowed. That he crossed his arms, his brow furrowing. "Empathy sounds good in theory, but we need measurable success numbers, results. These are the lifeblood of our company." The dismissal stung, exposing the chasm that divided them. "But aren't you the one who taught me about vision? Percentages alone can't sustain a company. They won't keep talented individuals from leaving. We must evolve." His stern expression softened slightly, and for a brief moment, she glimpsed the possibility of a crack in his armor. Perhaps there was room for negotiation, for the acceptance of a new perspective. "How do you propose to drive these changes?" he questioned, intrigued despite himself. A spark of hope ignited within Rebecca. "We create a task force that encourages collaboration across departments. Fostering relationships will be our first metric. Imagine incorporating our metrics of compassion alongside productivity measures." Ideas flowed freely now, fueled by a newfound clarity. "If we invest in people, in their well-being, our profits will follow." Whitman rubbed his chin thoughtfully, the restlessness in his demeanor shifting to deliberation. This moment felt pivotal. She dared to hope that through her vulnerability, she could change not just policy, but culture. "Very well," he said cautiously. "Let us pilot this initiative as an experiment. But, Rebecca, you must provide me with clear evidence when this doesn't shake the foundation too much." Relief washed over her. This was more than a concession, it was acknowledgement. Yet doubt wormed back into her mind. A trial and potential failure loomed. What if her vision was misguided, and her unwavering commitment faltered in the pressure of reality? She exited his office, adrenaline surging, spurring her forward even as uncertainty clawed at her confidence. Discussions in the corridors were buzzing around her initiative, a tenuous connection forming among her colleagues, some curious, some skeptical, but all undeniably intrigued. What awaited her next was an unpredictable landscape fraught with potential. Each day would be a test, a tightrope walk between ambition and authenticity. She couldn't shake the sense that a reckoning was approaching, as threats nestled in the corners of office banter and strategic whispers amplified in the days that followed. Could she defend not just her vision but true connection amidst a culture that thrived on division? Time was running short for her dream, and the pressure of answering that question only tightened with each passing moment. Rebecca stepped into the break room, her heart racing from the whirlwind of her earlier meeting. The air felt charged, a mixture of excitement and trepidation charged among her colleagues. Their eyes met hers like sparking wires ready to ignite. She could feel the anticipation and the skepticism, both urging her to rise or to falter. This was the crucible she had envisioned, where her ideals could flourish or crumble. "Hey, Rebecca," Sarah, a fellow team member, greeted her hesitantly. "I heard about your proposal. It's bold, but do you really think it can work here?" Rebecca's mouth went dry, the questions that only seconds ago had felt resolute now echoed loudly in her mind. "I believe it can," she replied, forcing a confident smile. She realized she had to expand her comfort zone, not just for herself but for their shared workspace. If we embrace empathy in our workflows, we can reimagine how we collaborate. It's about connection first. Sarah sighed, her eyebrows knitting together. That sounds great in theory, but will upper management really support that? Whitman seems focused solely on numbers. I know it's a risk, Rebecca conceded, leaning against the counter. But we can redefine those numbers by changing how we work together. This could improve our overall productivity if we care for each other. The words flowed more naturally now. Perhaps this connection she sought was also one she could forge with her colleagues. Sarah nodded slowly, and for a moment, Rebecca felt a flicker of hope, the beginnings of a bridge forming across their divide. This was more than just a professional obligation, it was personal. Feeling emboldened, Rebecca knew she needed to rally a few supporters to her cause. She decided to host small group sessions to discuss her vision, encouraging feedback and engagement. The first meeting came together around a small table with only 4 colleagues. Tentative discussions led to passionate debates, unveiling hidden frustrations simmering beneath the surface. She listened intently, knowing that empathy began with understanding their individual and collective concerns. However, as the weeks rolled on, the excitement of her initiative began to fade, replaced by whispers of doubt. Still haven't seen any measurable impact, Rebecca, Frank, a staunch traditionalist, remarked during a review meeting. How long before we pivot back to what actually works? Remember, we operate in a competitive market. Rebecca felt her stomach twist. Our progress isn't always quantifiable right now. The relationships we're building take time that costs money, Frank interrupted, and Rebecca could sense the eyes of others darting between them, gauging which narrative would prevail. For all her determination, she felt her resolve waver in the tension of this confrontation. How could she convey that transformation wasn't instantaneous, but instead a journey? Without hesitation, she laid out her plan, a series of quantitative assessments based not just on productivity, but on team cohesion and satisfaction. From that point onward, she began measuring these softer metrics, asking her team to contribute their thoughts anonymously. She believed that if she could unveil something actionable from these voices, she might shift the tide in her favor. Days turned into weeks filled with breakthrough discussions alongside crippling self-doubt. Conversely, the supportive voices within her cohort seemed to multiply, their gatherings encouraged by the promise of meaningful change. They became a collaborative force pushing against the rigidity of the institution around them. Despite this, Rebecca felt the pressure mounting with each skepticism she faced. The landscape wasn't just unpredictable, it was transforming into something that could either elevate or engulf her. With Whitman's expected check-in looming on the calendar, the stakes felt heightened. Would her calculated risks pay off or would they lead to disappointment? The transition ahead felt like a cliff band balancing precariously between hope and despair. As the meeting approached, a new question gnawed at her: how could she present her findings compellingly while still maintaining the spirit of the initiative? The time would soon arrive when she had to show either the seeds of progress or the stark reality of retreat. Would her voice be strong enough to withstand the storm that was about to break? As she breathed through her anxiousness, she recognized the looming reckoning would require more than just data. It would need her unwavering conviction. The days leading up to the meeting felt like a tightly wound spring in Rebecca's chest. Each morning, she could hear the faint whispers of doubt echoing louder, a cacophony of what-ifs reminding her of the precarious position she found herself in. Her meticulous planning, her attempts to instill empathy, felt as fragile as a thin layer of ice on an unfinished pond. Determined not to succumb to her fears, Rebecca took a moment to revisit her findings that week. She swept through the anonymous feedback once more, each comment painting a picture of what her colleagues truly felt. Frustrations about workloads, the monotony of day-to-day tasks, and a desire for connection emerged like threads woven into a tapestry of human experience. She realized they were not just metrics, they were stories, and stories demanded to be seen and felt. I can do this, she reassured herself in the mirror that morning, a sense of renewed strength washing over her. Casting her doubts aside, she focused on the potential impact of the change she was advocating for, not just the numbers reflected on a spreadsheet. Yet the reality of presenting this to Whitman still loomed, ominous and daunting. The thought of facing him, the embodiment of traditional values, sent her heart racing anew. Leaning into her apprehension, Rebecca sketched an outline of her strategy. She needed to frame her ideas not as an opposition to the current system, but as an evolution of their practices, an improvement that could coexist with their relentless pursuit of profit. To build this narrative, she categorized her feedback data, presenting it alongside her initial proposal to showcase the connections forged within her team. The human element, she muttered, repeating it like a mantra. It was the key that could unlock a new understanding not just for Whitman, but for everyone who had doubted her vision. As the date approached, however, the debilitating self-doubt re-emerged, darker and more assertive. What if Whitman dismissed her holistic perspective? What if he saw her passion as inadequacy? Just 2 days before the meeting, she experienced a wave of panic. Her hands trembled on the keyboard as she drafted and redrafted her points. Late that night, as she peered over the slowly dimming screen, the room illuminated only by the glow of her laptop, she wrestled with an unsettling realization. The stakes felt personal. It was more than the project or her job, it was the possibility of losing a part of her identity intertwined in this initiative. The dread demanded a confrontation, a decision. She could either cling desperately to her original vision or adapt, allowing evolution to refine her approach through the very challenges she faced. Inspired, she propelled herself into action. She revisited her team for another session, this time focusing on the emotional narratives behind their feedback, discussing their aspirations and fears. Their enthusiasm rekindled not only her resolve but also sparked a deeper connection within the group. People matter, Rebecca insisted, her voice steadying with each word she spoke, now weaving their shared narratives into the fabric of her proposal. If we make the human experience our priority, we can create a data-driven culture that values connection as much as productivity. On the eve of the big meeting, Rebecca felt something shift. The uncertainty hadn't vanished entirely, but a newfound clarity illuminated her path. Instead of preparing for battle against her notion of traditionalism, she envisioned collaboration, a coalition of insights that could ultimately win over even the most resistant hearts. As she tucked herself into bed that night, one thought echoed persistently: would Whitman see her for the leader she was capable of becoming, or would he reinforce the very barriers she was trying to dismantle? With the meeting time finally upon her, Rebecca realized that this was not just about survival, it was about her evolution in the workplace. The moment to confront the persistent skepticism ahead had arrived, calling forth every ounce of her courage. The air filled with tension as she walked into the conference room. Would her voice pierce through the cynicism awaiting her, or would the walls close in, swallowing her aspirations whole? Rebecca stood in front of the polished conference table, her heart pounding in rhythm with the clock ticking ominously on the wall. The room felt unwelcoming, a labyrinth of corporate shadows where innovation often withered under the weight of conformity. She took a deep breath. Now was her chance. As the meeting commenced, her colleagues shuffling in filled the air with muted exchanges. Whitman entered last, a formidable presence whose eyes narrowed with scrutiny. Rebecca felt a small stab of fear, a ghostlight flickering through her resolve. But as she gathered the thoughts coursing through her mind, she focused on their collective narrative rather than her fear of dismissal. This was about them, their stories turning fears into voices seeking understanding. "Thank you for being here today," Rebecca began, her palms sweating against the cool surface of the table. "I'm excited to share ideas that could not only elevate our productivity but also reinforce the connections within our team." She carefully proceeded with her presentation, each slide purposeful, her data interspersed with anecdotes from her colleagues' feedback. They spoke of not only what was wrong but also their yearning for empowerment, a deeper engagement beyond the mundane. But then came the moment of challenge. Whitman leaned forward, his steely gaze cutting through her momentum. "Rebecca," he interrupted, his tone decidedly critical, "you talk about connection and emotions like it's a strategy, but this is a business. We need results, numbers." Her heart sank momentarily, but the memories of late nights, of hope rekindled amongst her team, rose within her. "But the numbers reflect human experiences, Robert. Happy employees drive profitability. This is not just a sentimental argument, it's backed by data. High engagement correlates directly with elevated performance. Interesting theory, he replied, almost dismissively, but I'm concerned about practicality. We've always thrived in the chaos of analytical rigor. Rebecca faltered for only a moment but then chose to embody the confidence she had ignited in her team. What if we redefine chaos? We can blend analytical rigor with empathy. By valuing the human experience at every level, we enable innovation and foster genuine creativity. The room shifted. A few colleagues began to lean in, intrigued by her conviction, prompting Rebecca to seize the moment. She went deeper into their stories, the ones that reflected a longing for purpose in their daily tasks. As she spoke, something remarkable occurred. She no longer felt like she was fighting against an immovable force but rather creating a bridge toward potential understanding, yet Whitman was relentless. It sounds like wishful thinking, Rebecca. We have budgets and timelines that don't accommodate such experiential endeavors. We need to act fast. Doubt surged, but instead of retreating, Rebecca summoned her determination. If we continue to adhere rigidly to outdated paradigms, Robert, we will lose our best talent. The market evolves, and so must we. My proposal isn't about taking time from business, it's about building a sustainable foundation that fosters long-term success. The tension crackled in the air as silence fell. Whitman shifted in his seat, annoyance briefly clouding his expression. The clock continued to tick. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded slowly. Perhaps we need to consider a pilot project to assess these ideas in a practical context. Rebecca seized the opportunity. Exactly. A small-scale implementation could yield insightful data-real feedback on whether this approach works without overwhelming our current structure. As the meeting adjourned, a feeling of cautious optimism entwined with the lingering uncertainty. Rebecca's heart raced, both exhilarated and fearful. Had she managed to crack the facade? Would Whitman extend her vision, transforming it into something greater, or would this remain a solitary victory eclipsed by his conservative stance? The conversation had shifted, momentum had begun to build. However, as she gathered her materials, the appreciation of the moment mingled with anxiety for the future. Would her courage in this confrontation lead to systemic change, or was she merely clinging to an ephemeral hope? As she exited the room, a sense of purpose ignited within her, yet a haunting realization loomed: the next battle lay ahead, and now she had to align her team's spirit with strategic implementation, facing not just opposing ideas but the fundamental resistance to change entrenched in the company's culture. The stakes had never been higher, and with the responsibility of leading a transformation on her shoulders, Rebecca understood one thing vividly: this journey required more than just her voice, it demanded unity, bravery, and relentless commitment to her vision. But who would stand with her when the true test of this transformation arrived? Rebecca entered her office, a sanctuary of calm amid the corporate storm swirling outside. The walls, lined with postcards and photos of family and friends, always reminded her of the life she strived to balance with her career ambitions. Today, though, even these reminders felt heavy. She leaned against her desk, heart racing as she replayed the confrontation in the conference room. Whitman's skepticism lingered in her mind like a persistent shadow, clawing at her confidence. Was it enough? She whispered to herself, staring at the Araucaria plant she had nurtured since her first day at the firm. Its green leaves symbolized growth, a reminder that resilience was integral to her journey. She knew she needed to harness that same spirit with her team. Determined, Rebecca grabbed her notepad and scrawled down her thoughts. Freedom to explore was paramount. She envisioned initiating sessions where employees could voice their ideas without fear of backlash. She would create a safe space for every team member to contribute, not just the loudest voices. Would anyone join her in this endeavor? Would they believe in the possibility of transformation? Time was an ally in her thoughts, but as minutes morphed into hours, the unsettling anxiety began to creep in again. With each passing moment, she felt the pressure mounting not just from Whitman, but from a corporate atmosphere that thrived on practicality over potential. This fear gnawed at her as she began re-evaluating her strategy. her fingers danced over her keyboard as she crafted an email announcing a brainstorming session for the following day. The goal was to dissect the practical challenges of her proposal and to cultivate actionable insights from her colleagues. This collaboration could unlock a cascade of creativity, she hoped. As she hit send, a tremor of uncertainty echoed through her. She needed engaged participants, but how would she convince them to overcome their own fears? The next morning, she arrived early, eager yet apprehensive. Each person who walked into the conference room, however, appeared worn and uninspired, doubt etched into their expressions. Determined to change that energy, Rebecca endeavored to infuse positivity, lifting her chin and smiling warmly at each. "Thank you all for joining," she began, oblivious to the mounting nerves curled in her stomach. "Today is about turning our experiences and ideas into something incredible. Let us not just critique, let us create." The voices of her team, normally shrouded under deference, began to surface. Jane from marketing spoke up first, her eyes lighting up as she described how customer feedback trials had diverted from stricter protocols. The notion that emotional engagement could lead to successful branding resonated across the room. Little by little, hands rose, and ideas flowed like a refreshing stream. For every barrier laid out, voices emerged, offering solution after solution. Rebecca watched in awe. Her team was finding its footing in a landscape they had previously felt relegated to navigate blindly. However, a twist emerged midway through their session. An uncomfortable silence fell as Whitman entered unexpectedly, arms crossed, a frown marring his usually stoic face. The energy instantly shifted, the seeds of self-doubt began to take root within Rebecca again. Would he quash the autonomy that was finally blossoming? "Interesting discussion you have here," he remarked, dismissing the airborne ideas with a wave of his hand. "But let us remember, folks, we need concise action points, or all this brainstorming will lead to nothing." The admonition stung, but Rebecca swallowed hard, resilience bubbling to the surface. This was her moment. "It is true we need actionable insights, Robert," she replied, finding strength in her voice. "But I believe that action requires a spark of inspiration. Without engagement, our action points will fall flat." Children's laughter, faint but clear, echoed in her mind, reminding her of the bigger picture she had once fought her own battles to pursue her dream. Why shouldn't they fight for theirs? His brows furrowed, the room was charged with anticipation. Would he dismiss her brave pushback as folly, or could she convince him that connection laid the groundwork for impactful decisions? As her team hung on her words, she felt the shift happening within them, as if Whitman's presence had somehow boiled the water of their courage. Perhaps this was the very chaos she had aimed to redefine. In that instant, she realized a crucial truth: the process of change lay in deeply felt conviction and shared purpose, one that she had accidentally ignited with her original proposal. Yet as hope reignited, Rebecca sensed the slope she was on, the urge to duck away from confrontation itching beneath her skin. She deignited a spark, but the true test awaited her. If Whitman's influence was to change, how could she guide the team to stand united against the opposing tides? With that fresh resolve, she turned to her colleagues. "We can chart our course together. Just know, every voice here counts." The tension crackled anew, not yet resolved but now filled with possibility. But as Whitman's eyes bore into her, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that her next move would determine everything. How deeply was he invested in upholding the old guard, and what if she had to fight to free her team from that grip? Her heart raced anew, her breath steadying for the impending challenge. This was only the beginning. Would they harness this spirit of unity as they faced their greatest critic? The silence in the conference room was deafening, broken only by the rustle of paper and the hesitant coughs of her colleagues. Rebecca felt the weight of Whitman's gaze like a physical force against her back. Her heart raced as she considered the implications of her defiance. She was venturing into uncharted territory, one where her position could be at stake. Yet, the thought of retreating ignited a flame of defiance deep within her. "What do you think, Robert?" she suddenly asked, turning the focus back to him. "Do you see the value in allowing our team to express their ideas freely? What if we collaborated on finding those actionable insights instead of defaulting to imposition? He hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his features. Rebecca could sense his conflict, the old guard he represented eroding in the wake of her team's growing confidence. This was their moment to wrestle back their autonomy, and she refused to let it slip away. She felt their collective energy palpable in the air, urging her on, bolstering her resolve. "All right, I see your point," Whitman finally replied, though his tone revealed reluctance. "But let us not lose sight of our objectives. Keep things focused." He motioned for her to proceed, but the tension hadn't dissipated, the air was still thick with doubt and fear. "Absolutely," Rebecca responded, her voice steady despite the underlying tide of anxiety. "Let us capture those action points, but I want to hear from every one of you first." She turned to the team, a determined cheer in her voice. "We're going to brainstorm solutions, and I need everyone's input. This is about your perspectives enlightening our path forward." Hands shot up, voices rising once more, and for the first time, Rebecca felt an exhilarating sense of unity. Each member added layers to the discussion that had initially felt stifling. Ideas that seemed impractical at first gained traction, and soon, they were mapping outlines for new strategies that transcended traditional corporate limitations, yet the thrill of success was tempered. With each passing moment, Rebecca felt the dual pressure of expectation and her own self-doubt. Would the proposals hold once Whitman reviewed them? She wrestled with a gnawing fear that any moment now, he would dismiss everything they had built together. After an intense hour of exchanging perspectives, the team settled on 3 actionable initiatives, all stemming from the collective creativity ignited during the session. They were aligned in vision, and that alone filled Rebecca with hope. She gathered their notes tightly in her grasp, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than before. "Thank you all for your incredible input," she said, trying to curb the flutter of uncertainty in her stomach. "Let us present these tomorrow. Together, we'll make a case for our proposal." As the meeting adjourned, Rebecca stepped into the hallway, ready to breathe. But her thoughts raced. What if Whitman rejected their ideas outright? What if he ridiculed their efforts, seeding doubt back into their minds? The fear of failure loomed ominously. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table, her fingers twisting a pen in contemplation. She thought of her son and the strength he seemed to embody, his potential unwavering and unyielding. What would he want her to do in the face of judgment? She needed to confront her own fears, just as she advocated for her team. Sleep eluded her as she mulled over the possibilities and outcomes, replaying every move they had made. She had prioritized their voices, but could she continue to champion this unity in the face of professional resistance? The next morning, she arrived at the office armed with the presentation. Determination coursed through her veins, mingling with lingering doubts. This moment was no longer just about the team's collective voice, it was a reflection of her personal growth, an echo of her struggle to forge her own identity amid the corporate storm. Just as Rebecca stepped into the conference room, she spotted Whitman already seated at the head of the table with his usual demeanor, arms crossed, a frown upon his brow. An electric tension charged the atmosphere again. With the team gathered behind her, she planted herself firmly in front of him. The stakes had escalated, and this was more than just her proposal, it was about the right to exist and express within the confines of an oppressive structure. As she began, she felt a daring conviction blossom within. Today, she would not just advocate for their ideas, she would confront the fear of being silenced. Could she shift not only the room's energy but also Whitman's perspective? Would she uncover the courage needed to dismantle the barriers her team once faced? This was only the beginning of her stand. The time had come to face the very person who could either harbor her dreams or crush them. Rebecca stood resolute as she faced Whitman, her colleague's supportive presence surrounding her like a fortress. The stakes had never been higher, yet within her churned a bravado fueled by their rallying cries for transformation. Today, she wasn't merely presenting a proposal, she was reclaiming her narrative, one that intertwined ambition with authenticity. "Thank you for being here," she began, her voice steady, amplified by the warmth emanating from her team. What we're about to share isn't just a series of initiatives, it's a call for real engagement and collaboration within our corporate culture. These are not just statistics, they are voices of our team members longing for evolution. As she outlined their actionable initiatives, adaptive mentorship programs, structured feedback loops, and coworker appreciation initiatives, she felt momentum rising. The faces of her colleagues radiated muted excitement, a collective anticipation that hung palpably in the air. However, as Whitman interjected, the tension resurfaced. But Rebecca, how do these experiences translate into metrics we can rely on? How can we assure investors this approach will yield profitability? He leaned back, arms crossed, a posture that signaled the battle lines were drawn. Rebecca, drawing strength from the energy swirling around her, leaned into the challenge. Metrics can be misleading when disconnected from humanity, Robert. While we must prioritize results, we cannot ignore the reality that these initiatives enhance our performance by fostering well-being. Happy employees not only stay, they perform and propel innovation. This is data we can measure. We want to cultivate a thriving culture, not just another hollow statistic. The atmosphere shifted, a whisper of acknowledgement threaded through her colleagues. Whitman hesitated, caught within the tension of responsibility and the magnetic pull of Rebecca's determined vision. Look, she continued, unyielding, investments in our people create ripples that can yield higher returns. I have feedback from our team's people are eager to engage and contribute to our mission, but they need us to pave the way. We can create not just a results-oriented environment but one rooted in connection. It will drive success. And in that moment, she saw it an opening. A slight crack in Whitman's authoritative exterior. He blinked, glancing from Rebecca to the eager faces behind her, each pair of eyes reflecting both hope and resolve. If we pilot these ideas, I want to see the evidence, ongoing results that show real growth. I still stand firm that business must be driven by tangible results. Whitman's words hung in the air, but this was an invitation. She knew it. Rebecca felt the relief wash over her as she seized that opportunity. Absolutely. We can establish specific KPIs that integrate employee satisfaction metrics with productivity outcomes. Grant us the chance, and I promise you'll see change. Her heart surged with a newfound confidence, emboldened by her team's unwavering support. Whitman nodded slowly, uncertainty battling within him. I'll consider it, Rebecca. There must be clear follow-up conversations if we're to go down this route. As the meeting came to a close, Rebecca felt like she had stepped out of the confines of her former self, a transformation ignited by sincere conversations and the bonds she had cultivated. She had initiated a pivotal shift not just for herself but for every individual in her department, championing a landscape where their voices mattered. Days turned into weeks as the pilot initiative took root. Progress was gradual, yet palpable, employees engaged, and the culture morphed, layering empathy onto efficiency. The meetings transformed from cold exchanges to dynamic conversations, grounded in a collective purpose. Whitman, though cautious, soon began to embrace the changes, adapting to a model that balanced compassion and corporate responsibility. Her confidence soared as recognition seeped into the fabric of the office. Rebecca received accolades for her leadership efforts, sparking empowerment across teams. This new chapter, one marked by authenticity, began to extend beyond the office walls. She reached out, re-establishing a connection with her father, their tentative conversations unraveling years of silence, each shared moment a testimony to her profound shift. Rebecca's journey had transcended the boardrooms. It became a testament to redefining what success actually meant. Pride welled within her as she gazed at the flourishing Araucaria plant from her desk, a symbol of unwavering growth and resilience. With a heart open to connection, she finally found the balance she had long sought, leading with compassion without sacrificing ambition. Reflecting on her pathway, Rebecca knew she had indeed carved a new legacy, one that echoed the values of family, connection, and genuine fulfillment. It was time for the world to hear this story. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you do not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, comment your reactions and theories about the ending, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.